Yeah, Prophet Marshall Occurrence back at it. Okay, so this video is going to be about what generation I believe destroyed America. The generation I believe destroyed America was the baby boomers. The baby boomers are the ones that destroyed this country. So this video is going to be basically me breaking down who to blame for destroying America. Because especially when it comes to the black community, we don't know, because of all the stuff that's been going on for probably about the past 40 plus years, about 45 years, it's hard to place the blame on a certain generation. But it wasn't everybody, because everybody wasn't here. I wasn't here in the 70s nor the 60s. You know, and when crack first hit, I was too young to be selling crack when it first hit. Actually, crack came out the year I was born. I was born in 81, and that's when crack came to America. You can go check that. So I was born in 1981, the same year crack came out. So that gives you kind of idea how young and how old I am at the same time. That's why I told you I'm young and old, being at my age right now. You know, because I was born the same year crack came out. Everybody can't say that. 82, it wasn't 82, it wasn't 87, it was 81 that crack came to America. So, you couldn't say it was us that was selling crack when it first came out. So who was it? It wasn't my generation, because some people look at my generation. I'm 45 years old now. But some people look to my generation and think that we're the ones that did all this stuff, and it goes from people, the old school pass the blame as they get older to every new generation. Y'all the reason why this happened. Y'all the reason. Y'all the ones. You the ones. You the ones. But the truth is, man, I learned that the intelligent man studies history by generations. I study history by generation. I don't just look at a tribe of people and say all of y'all to blame, because you can't find out the real history that way, where the liabilities are. Glory to God. So basically, this is what I'm doing, is breaking down the liabilities by generation. See, most tribe masters, chiefs, a chief will study the history of his tribe and place the proper liabilities on each generation and say, well, this is why this happened. This is why we have this particular problem, because of this generation and what they did here. You see what I'm saying? And so basically that's what I'm doing. You know, I'm just showing my intellectual property. I'm showing you my original messages in my original campaigns. This is an original message and campaign that I think was necessary for you to see where I'm at in my lane. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of people don't know my lane and how deep it gets. You know what I'm saying? So you know that part. So you know, I just want to show you how deep my lane gets, because just addressing this stuff out here in the streets with this gang stalking, that's not how deep my lane get, bro. My lane is way deeper than that, bro. That's on the side of my lane, actually. That's on the side, on the side of the street of my lane. You know what I mean? But so that's another reason why I'm doing these videos now. That's kind of like off of the subject of the gang stalking and all of that. This is more showing you my intellectual property, where my mind, what my mind really can produce on its own, my original messages. And so my original message here is, it was the baby boomers that destroyed the United States of America. And I'm gonna prove that. I'm gonna start with the black community, how we got destroyed as a community. And ultimately, because I'm black, of course, I'm going to talk about our community and the generations of African Americans, and it's the baby boomers that destroyed our community. It wasn't. It was. I'm Generation X. It wasn't Generation X. It was the baby boomers. So, I'm going to get into the logistics of why I believe that. But what I'm going to school you on first and educate you on first is generations, because it's either something you've been educated on or you haven't. You either know it or you don't. It's that kind of stuff. And I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't know nothing about the different generations. All I knew about was baby boomers. That's the only, and Generation X and millennials. I would say those three I knew about, but like older than the baby boomer generation, I didn't know about that. And younger than the generation, the millennial, I didn't know about that. So I went and educated myself on all the generations of America. And like I said, when I look at the dates, which that's what I will challenge you to do, when you look at the dates of the generations, because each generation is born into a date. You're placed in a generation by the date you was born. You can't choose to be the baby boomers, or you can't choose to be Generation X, It's based on your years that you're born here in America. So there's a name for each generation, okay? And so what I'm about to do is go through, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm going to go through the past 9 generations of the modern day era that we live in. The past 9 generations. Started from 1883 going to 2039 is the present modern day generations, from 1883 to 2029 to 2039. So from 1883 to 2039, that's what I'm going to be covering, the year 2039. Okay, so the first generation, I thought to go no further than 1883. I thought that was a good place as far as modern day history. I didn't think I needed to go any further back than that. I started with my first generation being at 1883. Okay, so this generation that starts at the year 1883 is the lost generation, as in losing something, lost, the lost generation. The lost generation, and I'm gonna be just going down the list of the years and the dates of each generation. So the lost generation starts at 1883 and it ends at the year 1900. So the lost generation starts at 1883 and ends the year 1900 on the dot. So from 1883 to 1900, the year 1900. This is called the lost generation. The lost generation is from 1883 to the year 1900. So everybody born in the year, between the years 1883 and the year 1900 is born into the lost generation. The next generation is called the greatest generation. This generation starts at 1901 to the year 1927. So the greatest generation, its dates is from 1901 to the year 1927. Everybody born between the year 1901 to the year 1927 is born into the greatest generation, which is the generation of my grandmother. My grandmother was born 1917, so she was born into the greatest generation between 1901 and 1927. The silent generation is the next generation. This is the third generation. The silent generation is starting from the year 1928 to the year 1945. So everybody born between the years 1928 and 1945 is born into the silent generation, as in silence, silent generation. So this is the third generation that I'm talking about. The silent generation years are from 1928 to 1945. So everybody born between the year 1928 to the year 1945, that's the silent generation. Anybody born between the dates 1928 to 1945 through 1945, that's the silent generation. So far, let's review. We've covered the lost generation, dates 1883 to the year 1900, the greatest generation, 1901 to the year 1927, and the silent generation, dates starting from 1928 to 1945. Okay, so you got the lost generation, the greatest generation, and the silent generation. The next generation is the generation that I'm going to be talking about, which is the baby boomers. The reason why it's called the baby boomers is because the GIs, the military, was coming home and making love to their wives and making a whole bunch of kids. So they called that the baby boomers generation. That's why, because it was a boom in having babies, if you will. Because all the men that came home from war, and I'm guessing that's World War II, were having babies. Yeah, that's World War II. So everybody coming, the military coming back from World War II were having a lot of babies, you know, getting glad to be back after that war, and making love to their wives, you know, and or their husbands, and having kids. And so the baby boomers generation starts from 1946 to 1969. The baby boomer generation is from 1946 to 1969. So anybody born between the years 1946 to the year 1969 is baby boomers generation. So the baby boomers years are between the years 1946 and 1969. Anyone born between the years 1946 through 1969 is born into the baby boomers generation. Next is Generation X, born between the years 1965 through 1984. So anyone that's born between 1965 through 1984 is born into Generation X. Generation X was considered the outcast generation. If anybody remember, they had these articles all around the country in the 90s talking about Generation X, Generation X, generate. They talk. I'm glad I'm saying this in this video. They talked about down on us almost, like we were the outcast, the hopeless generation, you know, and that's how we were talked about in the 90s in these articles. You know, who is Generation X and what are they gonna do and that kind of stuff. They're the bad generation. That's how we were looked at. So anyone born between the years 1965 and 1984, between those dates, if you was born between those dates of 1965 and 1984, you were born into Generation X. Next, the millennials. The millennials generation. What makes me unique is I'm born into two generations. I'm born into Generation X and millennials because I was born 1981. The millennials generation starts off at 1981. So I'm the leader of the millennials generation. The millennials. The millennials were born between the dates 1981 through 1995. So the millennials were born between the years 1981 through 1995. So if you were born between 1981 and 1995, one of those years in between 1981 and 1995, you were born into the millennials generation. So as you can see, Generation X starts at 1965 and ends at 1984. So because I'm born 1981, I'm born as one of the youngest in Generation X. Being that I was born in 1981, the dates for Generation X is 1965 through 1984. And I was born in 1981, so I'm in that generation, and I'm also in the millennials generation as the leader. With its dates starting at 1981 through 1995. So my year that I was born is the leader, the oldest of the millennials generation. The dates for the millennials generation is 1981 and 1995, and I'm the leader of that generation. Okay, Generation Z is next. Generation Z, as in zebra. Generation Z starts at 1996 and ends at 2010. So Generation Z starts at 1996 through 2010. So everybody born between the years 1996 and 2010 was born into Generation Z. Anybody born, which the oldest of Generation Z this year is 30 years old. That's the oldest of them. So anybody 30 in their 20s, that's Generation Z right now. Okay? So somebody born in 2006 will be 20. That's Generation Z. So all 20-year-olds right now is Generation Z. born between the years 1996 through 2010. That's Generation Z. Anybody born between the years 1996 and 2010 is born into Generation Z. Now, here's basically the babies. Generation Alpha is the generation you probably didn't hear about. Generation Alpha started from 2011 and ended last year at 2025. So any of the children that's born between 2011 and 2025 is born into Generation Alpha. So all kids born last year is born into Generation Alpha. Generation Alpha, its dates is 2011, 2011. Any kids born from, so that those kids, anybody that's 15, that's the youngest of their generation. Anybody that's like 15 is Generation Alpha. That's the oldest of that generation right now, presently. The oldest of that generation is 15 years old. Anybody 15, 14, 13, that's Generation Alpha, with their dates for their births starting from 2011 to 2025. So a new generation started this year. This is the new generation. And I think I think that it's a spiritual change, or a new spiritual season because of a new generation being born. Because the last generation that started was in 2011. So we haven't had a new generation since 2011. Look how much has happened since 2011. It's like a night and day difference. And 2011 was a good year for me. I know that. That was a good year for me. But that's the last time we had a new generation. Okay? Okay, so once again, Generation Alpha is from 2011 to 2025, which was last year. So that generation ended last year. So I believe it's a new spiritual season because of a new generation. Okay, the present generation of children being born, any children being born in 26, any children being born in 2026 is called Generation Beta, Generation Beta, BETA, Beta. I'm pretty sure that's Beta instead of Beta. I'm pretty sure that's Beta. That just sounds more accurate or proper English. But that's the present generation of any kids born now. Between 2026, any kids born now in 2026 is born into the new generation that started this year. See, that's why it's significant that I talked about this. The prophet is always on point, man. You know, there's some people that's going to go through this whole year and not know a new generation started this year. They ain't going to know. So that's why it's important for me to cover the generations first before I get into the message. I'm probably going to have to do part 2 of this. I ain't tripping. I'm going to probably have to do part 2. Because everybody needed to know these generations. Now you know. Now you know from lost generation to Generation Beta. Generation Beta started this year from 2026 and it's going to 2039. So the dates of Generation Beta is from 2026 to 2039. That's going to end Generation Beta at 2039 and a new generation will start. So these are real generations. It's not like a million of them. As you can see, There's 9 generations that I'm talking about, starting from 1883, ending at 2039. There's only 9 of them. So some people get scrambled brain when you talk about generations. You might think there are some over here, but this tribe and this tribe and that tribe, it covers all of America. We all born, whether you black, white, whatever you're born into as far as tribe, we're all, if you're born on American soil, you're classified among these generations. Okay? Now, outside of other countries, I'm sure they got different names for their generations in their other countries. But here, if you're born on American soil, you're born into one of these generations. You got to be. From 1883, you got to be born into one of these generations that I named, right? So from 1883 to 2039 is the present modern day generations, the 9 generations. So now you know the 9 generations that are in modern day history in America. Now you know. The lost generation, the greatest generation, the silent generation, the baby boomers generation, the Generation X, the millennials generation, Generation Z, Generation Alpha, and Generation Beta. Okay. Yeah. Now, if you hear any other terms or anything, I just gave you present dates and everything like that. And listen, these are real facts. These are real dates. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so. Yeah. Yeah. So that's 9 generations. And you could just go through these 9 generations and just kind of really just see, think about history, think about a lot of stuff, music, entertainment, you know, all these people born into certain generations. And what I looked at was what generations was Malcolm X and MLK born into. MLK and Malcolm X was born into what we call the silent generation. The silent generation, which the dates of the silent generation was from 1928 to 1945. The silent generation starts at 1928 through 1945. So Malcolm X and MLK, Martin Luther King Jr., were both born into the silent generation. Also, Louis Farrakhan was also born into the silent generation. Okay, so the greatest leaders, the greatest African American leaders were born into the silent generation. That's important for you if you black to know that your greatest leaders came from a certain generation. Your greatest leaders came from the silent generation. You should be able to tell people that. What was the greatest leaders? What generation of people of African American did you get the greatest leaders for African Americans? It was the silent generation, where you got Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. So you that are educated and love education, you should be able to tell people, yes, our greatest leaders were born into the silent generation. The dates 1928 to 1945, that's where our best leaders came from. Because what I believe is if you claim to be for black people and pro-black, you got to be educated. It can't just be zealous passion. Nah, that ain't gonna hold up, buddy. Because your war is not gonna hold up unless you are educated. Okay? So you should be able to tell people, what is the greatest generation of African Americans? I never thought about that. What's the greatest generation of African Americans in America? If you claim to be pro-black, if you claim to love your people, if you claim to know what black is and you claim to be black, that's something you should know. If somebody asked me that, I would know. If you ask me that randomly, I would be able to tell you the greatest generation of African Americans based on contributions to our community, based on what they did for our community. What is the greatest generation based on what they did for our community? The greatest generation is the silent generation. That's the greatest generation of African Americans, hands down, off the strength of Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. That's what makes the silent generation the greatest generation of African Americans. You should be able to, now, look, be honest. I educated you. I showed you, I'm showing you what it is, right? That's the greatest generation of African Americans, hands down. Ain't nobody else, ain't no other generation greater than the silent generation, off the strength of Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., and Louis Farrakhan being born from that generation. That's the greatest generation of black people. And you should be, and if you are educated, if you are a pro-black teacher or leader, if you defend black people, then you should be able to tell me, what's the greatest generation of African Americans? But be honest, you didn't know. And see, that's why the prophet is in the position that he's in. You couldn't even tell people, no, I got to tell you this. Because see, if I don't show you my rank, you gonna think you in my lane. But you couldn't even tell us what is the greatest generation of African Americans. You're gonna say, well, you might say baby boomers. Because that's the only one everybody knows. But I guarantee you, most people in America would not be able to tell people, based on contributions to society in black people, what is the greatest generation of African Americans? What is it? Now you know. Now the prophet has educated you. Now you're seeing the depth of my lane. Because all these people running around talking about they for black people and black power and all of that. Go ask them. I challenge you to go ask them. What is the greatest generation of African Americans? They can't even tell you. No, you supposed to listen, buddy. Are you here? Are you here? You're here, right? Okay, you're here. Okay, so then you should be able to tell us what the greatest generation is. So next time you think you in my lane with that little witchcraft stuff you doing, with that little psychological stuff you're doing in public, next time you think you in my lane, remember that I educated you on the greatest generation of African Americans. You didn't even know it. Oh, yeah. See, we're putting everybody in rank. That's important. When you go to the military, you don't have buck privates acting like generals. When you go to the military, you don't have buck privates and lieutenants acting like generals. You a buck private, buddy. Out here with your bird chest out. Whether you're a man or woman, you are a buck private. You a buck private, ain't you? You a buck private, ain't you? I'm a general, buddy. And listen, no, listen. If you don't do this, no, listen. If I don't do this, I'm gonna tell you what happened. People will hear this information and find it interesting without putting me in my proper rank. So how many people knew that the silent generation is the best generation of African Americans? Go find them. That includes Jamaicans, Haitians, and other African tribes and nations. Did you know what is the greatest African American tribe? No, you didn't. You didn't know. Just be honest. And be honest and say, yes, the prophet is the one that educated me. Because guess what? Whether you admit it or not, if I did educate you, my intellectual DNA is in you, which means I'm going to get credit for it on Judgment Day. If I educated you and you didn't know about child marriage in America, I'm getting credit on Judgment Day, I say humbly. Oh yeah. Because my intellectual DNA can't hide from the almighty supreme being. He can see all intellectual DNA in people and know where it came from. Woo. So if I educated you as Americans about child marriage and you ain't know, all my intellectual DNA gonna light up. God gonna see all that DNA. Boy, that's good right there. God gonna see all my intellectual DNA in you as a community. So you can front on me, right? You can front on me. But when Judgment Day comes, and before judgment, God sees my intellectual DNA in all you Americans. You lighten up with my intellectual DNA. You lighten up, buddy. And you might think, see, you front on the prophet, man. Like, but these rappers can be confident and talk like this, right? But when I talk like this, I'm being arrogant. But you listen to all these braggadocious rappers and all this arrogant as they come, some of them even narcissistic. You will sit back and laugh at the lines they talk about, these narcissistic bars they got. They got narcissistic rap bars, right? And you sit up and listen to it, right? And you don't think nothing of it. You don't think they conceited, arrogant, or nothing. But the prophet started showing his rank and confidence, and he's arrogant. You know, so I don't pay that no attention, bro. I know those who are of good understanding, know exactly where I'm coming from, bro. So, you know, first and foremost, man, I want you to realize I educated you on the silent generation, the greatest generation of African Americans. Okay, from now, the baby boomers. You got Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Al Sharpton, Trump. He comes from the baby boomers generation. So you got Al Sharpton, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and Trump come from the baby boomers generation. Edgar Hoover, who you might not know if you're not educated, who was the one that was the head of the FBI when Martin Luther King Jr. was active during the civil rights movement. He comes from the lost generation, born between the years 1883 and the year 1900. He comes from the lost generation, born into the year, between the years of 1883 and the year 1900. So that would be Edgar Hoover, and he was the head of the FBI. He was the one that was responsible for hounding after MLK, looking for him, bugging his room in his hotel, sending tapes to his wife. Stuff that's irrelevant to breaking the law. Stuff that's irrelevant to the FBI. Edgar Hoover, which was a Freemason also, by the way. Yeah, Edgar Hoover was a Freemason. He comes from the lost generation, born between the years 1883 and the year 1900. He was the one responsible for hounding and basically gang stalking Martin Luther King Jr. So next time you're gang stalking as a African American, remember Edgar Hoover basically was gang stalking Martin Luther King Jr. No, that's food for thought, though. That's food for thought. Okay, so I'm gonna come back with part 2. Now, basically, that's the introduction. I might have to do a part 1, part 2. Yeah. Part 2. I might consider that the introduction to the generations, because you needed to understand the whole layout of generations in America, because many people are not educated about that. So, now you see the level I'm on, man. I told you I'm an A-star general, man. The reason why I'm an A-star general is because I beat America with intellectual property and information about them marrying children. Okay, nobody knew that culturally. Nobody knew that. Also, in my spiritual position, I have overcome these people, which makes me an A-star general. Just in case you think I'm out here crazy and bugged out just saying stuff, okay, check my numbers, check my stats, bro. That's all I'm saying. For God's true people, salute. Over and out.